Today, our group is giving a Pecha Kucha presentation on the discourse surrounding same-sex marriage in Africa. We will be mentioning and examining the culturally specific arguments against same-sex marriage by using the countries Nigeria and Egypt as examples. We will then be comparing the arguments presented by Nigeria and Egypt against those by Western advocates of same-sex marriage. Starting off with legislation in Nigeria, its former president enacted the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act. This act places a 14-year prison term upon those who are convicted. It also places a 10-year prison term on anybody who advocates for homosexuality. Homosexuality is even punishable by death in 12 northern Nigerian states. Nigeria's collectivism and high power distances creates occurrences where vigilantes feel that it is right to forcefully impose the country's moral views on minorities in their community. Motivated by the new Prohibition Act, a group of nearly 50 Nigerians armed with weapons brutally beat at least 14 men that were accused of being homosexuals in the Gishiri village. Canada has showed deep concern over the extreme anti-gay laws present in Nigeria. The former Foreign Affairs Minister, John Baird, had tried to encourage the Nigerian government to revoke the law and protect the human rights of all of its Nigerian citizens. John Baird had also called on Nigeria to uphold the fundamental freedoms presented in the Nigerian constitution. The United Nations has denounced Nigeria's anti-gay legislation as well. The former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, describes the act as too harsh and said that it violated international equality laws that Nigeria had ratified. She also stated that the Same-Sex Prohibition Act in Nigeria violates a wide range of basic human rights. However, same-sex marriage is not a matter of human rights to the opposition in Nigeria, but rather a part of Western culture that directly attacks their African culture. According to a survey done by the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association, more than half of the Nigerians surveyed believe that homosexuality is an un-African phenomenon. Quote-unquote un-African same-sex marriages are transgressions of the Nigerian religious and familial norms. A survey conducted in 2019 showed that 60% of the Nigerians surveyed would not accept a homosexual family member. The deviation from said norm leads to feelings of shame in the LGBT family member and brings shame to their entire family and the community as well. This reasoning presented by Nigerians that same-sex marriages and homosexuality are un-African and against their traditions is also prevalent in Nigerian politicians' arguments. On a 4-day visit to the United States in 2015, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari remained adamant in the stance that there is no room for same-sex marriages and homosexuality in Nigeria. After this meeting, Buhari's special advisor of media and publicity, Femi Adesina, tweeted that the topic was briefly mentioned to the Nigerian president during their conference. Adesina then described homosexuality as abhorrent and mentioned how Buhari took an emphatic stand against sodomy. He was then met with plenty of supportive Nigerians in the comments under his tweets. It is interesting and ironic to note that the ideology of homosexuality being unacceptable in Nigeria and many other African countries actually began during British colonization of those countries. Western advocates make the distinction that it is legalized homophobia, not same-sex relations, that should be alien to African countries.
During the annual Commonwealth Summit in 2018, the former Prime Minister of the UK, Theresa May, has commented on the effect that the colonization of Nigeria had on its views surrounding same-sex marriage. May said that she deeply regrets Britain's historical legacy of anti-gay laws and then urged countries like Nigeria to get rid of its outdated colonial-era legislation. Yet the immediate correlation between same-sex marriages to sodomy remained prevalent in religious African countries and their legislation. Egyptians, for example, argue against same-sex marriage because to them it is considered deviant behavior that goes against the absolute truths and fatwas, the Quran, and for the Christian minorities in the country, the Bible. While there is no specific act prohibiting same-sex marriage in Egypt, such relationships are considered immoral, illegal acts of habitual debauchery under the country's Islamic Sharia law and penal code. If charged, a person can be imprisoned from 6 months to 3 years per charge and can be given a fine of 100 to 300 Egyptian pounds. Another common cultural dimension between countries that oppose same-sex marriage and relationships, like Egypt and Nigeria, is their collectivism and emphasis on families. Egyptians, for example, believe that families and tradition are paramount in life. Therefore, some argue that same-sex marriage simply does not fit their traditions because homosexuals cannot biologically have children. LGBTQ people in Egypt rarely feel that they have the power to change anti-gay rhetoric in the country in fear of persecution by higher authorities or their communities. In 2017, at a concert in Cairo, several members of the crowd raised their pride flags and then were arrested and accused of public indecency and inciting immorality among young people. One of the flag raisers at the concert that was condemned and mistreated by Egyptian society and prison officials afterwards was Sarah Higazi. Unfortunately, the harassment on her social media became too much for her to bear, and she took her own life this past June. Western advocates responded with the hashtag Raise the Flag for Sarah to raise awareness for the mistreatment of LGBTQ Egyptians. Following the event of the concert in 2017, the current UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Rupert Colville, commented on the spike in arrests of gay men in Egypt. He stated, arresting or detaining people based on their actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity is by definition arbitrary and violates international law. It is important to note that the right side of the argument on same-sex marriage may seem clear to those raised in Western countries. Countries like Canada promote individualism, have low power distances, and are not afraid of ambiguity. But for those in African countries that rely heavily on religious legislation and texts, the Western argument is interpreted as a threat to their stability. Now that we have reflected upon the opposing arguments on each side of the debate, there are some questions that must be addressed. One of the important questions to be raised concerning this discourse is whether or not the upholding of religion and cultural traditions in a country are reason enough to disagree with the marriage of people of the same sex. The acceptance of same-sex marriage in all of Africa is far from reality. This is partially due to its entrenched religious beliefs and idiosyncrasies, as well as its subjugation by the West for several decades. As interculturalists, we must recognize that the argument opposing same-sex marriage stems from countries' complex history, but we must keep advocating against persecution.